Their son's head was not forming properly, the brain almost non-existent. Miraculously, Jackson survived. He's now just over a year old.
Some babies enter the world and instantly leave everyone around them in awe. Not just because they're adorable, but because they're truly one of a kind. Their features and conditions are so rare that they push past every expectation, leaving doctors searching for answers and families holding on to hope.
No, otra vez.
Today, we're sharing the ones you'll never forget. Number 10. Tom Tennant.
There's no other little boy in the world quite like Tom Tennant, and medical science had not seen anything like it before.
The day Tom Tennant was born in southeastern Australia in 1993, the delivery room went quiet. Ultrasounds had already shown something wasn't quite right, but nothing prepared anyone for what they saw. His skin wasn't just wrinkled. It hung in thick, soft folds, more than you'd expect on a healthy 5-year-old, let alone a newborn. His father, Jeff, was stunned. He later admitted he never thought a baby could look like that. His mother, Debbie, was shocked too, but that feeling turned into fierce love the moment she held him.
When I saw him come out, I was quite shocked because I didn't expect or a little baby could ever look like that.
Doctors had no answers, no name for the condition, no treatment. All they could offer was a guess. Maybe, just maybe, he'd grow into his skin. Tom stayed in the hospital for the next 2.5 months. Doctors ran every test they could think of. Still, he remained a complete medical mystery. But then something clicked. A team of researchers noticed that Tom's skin folds looked oddly familiar. They resembled the wrinkles on Shar-Pei puppies. Led by dermatologist Dr. Andrew Ramsden.
In terms of his medical condition, is very special, I think, is very probably unique.
The team tested Tom's hyaluronic acid levels. The results were jaw-dropping. His body had about 100 times more of this sugar compound than usual, the same substance responsible for the Shar-Pei's signature wrinkles. Their prediction? As Tom grew taller and stretched out, his hyaluronic acid levels would drop, and the folds would slowly disappear. Amazingly, that's exactly what happened. Still, childhood wasn't easy. Kids didn't always understand, and some refused to play with him. But Tom never let it crush him. He kept smiling, and once said he only saw a kind, loving person when he looked in the mirror. His parents didn't hide him away. They let cameras follow his journey. Tom became a national symbol of resilience in Australia, not because he looked different, but because he faced it with courage.
They decided they wouldn't hide Tom because this boy has proved to them that beauty is more than skin deep.
By the time he was 11, he was more into soccer goals than doctor visits, and checkups showed his skin was catching up to his growing body. Fast forward to today, and Tom is 32 years old. His face looks almost completely typical. He works, pays bills, and lives a quiet life in Frankston, Victoria, with his wife, Hannah. Number 9. Heliani Lugo.
She's not able to close her eyes fully, and this, of course, can cause problems with scarring of the cornea, which is the outer layer of the eye.
Heliani Lugo was never supposed to survive. That's what the doctors said when they first saw her 20-week scan in San Cristobal, Venezuela. She had no fully formed eyes, barely a nose, and her fingers were fused like soft mittens. Her skull bulged so dramatically from fluid buildup that it formed a kind of crown. Specialists told her mother, 24-year-old Solianis Lugos, that the condition was not compatible with life and advised her to end the pregnancy. But every time Solianis played soft guitar music against her belly, she felt gentle kicks in return. That was enough. She chose birth over termination. And on a humid August morning, after 39 weeks of waiting, a baby weighing just over 5 pounds was delivered, alive, crying, and swaddled in dark blue cloth to support her fragile head. Heliani was born with congenital hydrocephalus, a condition that affects around 1 in every 1,000 births in the United States. It causes cerebrospinal fluid to build up in the brain, often stretching the head far beyond the typical 13.5-inch circumference. In Heliani's case, fluid had filled nearly half her cranial space, compressing the brain and risking deadly pressure. Surgeons quickly implanted a shunt, thinner than a cocktail straw, through her skull and into her abdomen. That tiny tube stopped her scalp veins from rupturing and gave her family the one thing they weren't expecting: time. And she used that time well. By her first birthday, doctors had revised her shunt twice, partially repaired her cleft lip, and started correcting her clubfoot, a condition found in about 1 in every 536 babies born in the U.S. Using gentle custom casts, they slowly guided her feet into a more natural position. Meanwhile, friends in Miami began raising funds for future surgeries, including plans to reconstruct her eye sockets and separate her fused fingers. Venezuelan neurosurgeons also monitored her brain every 3 months, watching the fluid and her ventricles closely. Despite all odds, she made it past her 3rd birthday. She learned to babble and even shake a small maraca tied to the palm of the hand that had no fingers. Cases like Heliani's, where hydrocephalus appears alongside an ophthalmia, cleft lips, fused digits, and clubfoot, are so rare that they're documented one by one in medical journals. For comparison, cleft lip affects around 1 in 1,050 babies in the US, while full neural tube defects like encephalocele occur in just 1 in 10,000. But statistics don't tell the whole story. Every step Heliani takes, every adjustment of her shunt, every tiny therapy win is proof that early intervention can turn a grim diagnosis into something survivable. Her mother still calls her Mi Pequeña Reina, my little queen. Number 8. Connie Lloyd. Connie Lloyd's story started with something so small, most parents wouldn't think twice about it. A pink dot no bigger than a freckle on the bridge of her nose. But within just 4 weeks of her birth in Berkshire, England, that harmless dot had turned into a 1.5-inch, bright red swelling that made strangers think she was wearing a clown nose. Her parents, Zara Green and Tom Lloyd, were heartbroken. Doctors diagnosed it as an infantile hemangioma, a tangled mass of blood vessels that can grow fast and bleed easily, even with the lightest scratch. These growths aren't uncommon. Around 4 to 5% of babies are born with them.
It's called an infantile hemangioma. It's caused by an overgrowth of blood vessels, and it's commonly present on the babies. However, it can occur anywhere on the body.
But most shrink naturally and never cause serious problems. Only about 1 in 10 grow so aggressively that they need medical intervention. Connie's was one of those rare cases. The hemangioma pushed inward, squeezing her nasal passages and putting her at constant risk of dangerous bleeding. By the time she was 8 weeks old, Connie couldn't even lie on her stomach without pain. Her mom, exhausted and heartbroken, started hiding her in the car just to avoid the cruel comments people whispered. At 3 months old, Connie became just the 8th baby in the entire United Kingdom to be given oral propranolol, a heart medication that in 2008 was found to also slow down the growth of hemangiomas. Her doctors carefully measured out the dose, about 2 milligrams for every kilogram of her body weight. Within days, the surface of the tumor started softening. Blood flow to the area slowed, and for the first time, the swelling stopped getting worse. But there was a catch. Propranolol couldn't shrink the deep part of the tumor that had already settled into her face. A bump to the nose still meant a real danger of bleeding. For 2 years, Zara searched for help, emailing specialist after specialist, until she found Dr. Ian Hutchison, a facial reconstructive surgeon in London who was willing to take a risk. Most surgeons wait until a child is at least 10, but in March of 2011, when Connie was just 3, Hutchison performed a 3-hour surgery. He removed the vascular mass, reshaped her nose, and closed everything up with dissolvable threads. When Connie woke up, she gently touched her bandaged face and whispered, "My nose looks like mummy's." She started preschool not long after, walking in without flinching when someone looked at her. Today, Connie's a teenager with a faint line across her nose, a tiny scar in place of what could have been a lifetime of hiding. Thanks to her case, propranolol is now the go-to treatment for kids around the world. Number 7. Anahita Hashimza Day. On January 10, 2015, a 6-pound baby from Isfahan, Iran, lit up the internet before she'd even taken her first steps. Her name is Anahita Hashimza, and by the time her first professionally lit portrait landed on Instagram, she was already being called the cutest baby alive. With bright sea-green eyes, perfect dimples, and a soft halo of auburn curls, she became a viral sensation almost overnight. The account run by her mother, Mariam, shot from 0 to 100,000 followers in just 3 weeks. Before Anahita had even turned 4, she had modeled for a children's shoe brand in Tehran, a toy company in Dubai, and even a Milan-based kids' fashion line aimed at shoppers in the Gulf. Her emerald eyes, each barely half an inch wide, now appear on souvenir t-shirts sold from Tehran to Toronto. Of course, going viral comes with risks. In March of 2020, WhatsApp messages began spreading a false story that Anahita was in the ICU with coronavirus. The video attached to the claim wasn't even her. It showed an unrelated patient in Latin America. Fact-checkers in Sri Lanka quickly exposed the lie, and Mariam posted a live video of Anahita dancing to a Persian lullaby. The hoax was crushed in less than 48 hours. To keep things balanced, Anahita now attends a small private school just 3 blocks from home. She models only twice a week, after a short try at homeschooling left her feeling isolated. Her afternoons are simple: multiplication flashcards, short jogs with her big brother Armin, and piano practice where she plays 1-octave scales at 60 beats per minute. Every modeling job gets approved by both a pediatric specialist and a child labor lawyer, making sure nothing gets in the way of her childhood. Number 6. Jackson Emmett Buell. At just 17 weeks into her pregnancy, Brittany Buell sat in an Orlando exam room and listened to doctors describe something no parent ever wants to hear. Her unborn son's skull had stopped forming halfway back. His brainstem was floating in fluid. The diagnosis, microhydranencephaly, was so rare that it shows up in fewer than 1 in 1 million births. Doctors urged her and her husband, Brandon, to terminate the pregnancy, but the Buells refused. On August 27, 2014, Jackson Emmett Buell was born. He weighed just over 4 pounds, measured about 17 inches long, and had a head circumference of only 11 inches, well below the average of 13 and a half. Doctors expected him to live only minutes, maybe hours. About 80% of his brain was missing. But instead of fading away, Jackson blinked, grabbed his dad's finger, and spent the next 3.5 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit learning how to breathe on his own. Back home, the Buells began posting updates every night with the hashtag #JacksonStrong. By his first birthday, over 200,000 people were following his story, and a GoFundMe page had raised more than $100,000 for medications, therapy, and seizure care. By the time Jackson turned 2, he was just 25 inches tall and weighed 13 pounds. But he did things no doctor expected. He mouthed "Mama," giggled at Mickey Mouse cartoons, and tapped a toy drum when he wanted food. Neurologists at Boston Children's Hospital reviewed his MRI scans and confirmed the diagnosis. They called him a living lesson in neuroplasticity, meaning his brain had somehow found new ways to function. His condition, though, was brutal. Jackson couldn't walk. He relied on a feeding tube that was placed when he was 10 months old. He had seizures almost every day. Still, every small achievement, like smiling on purpose or making a new sound, made waves online. Jackson's heart stopped on April 1, 2020, in his father's arms at his grandparents' home in North Carolina. He lived 5 years and 37 days, more than 1,000 times longer than doctors predicted. News outlets like CNN and People magazine called him the strongest little boy. Today, the Jackson Strong Foundation funds research to better understand why children like him survive at all. Even in 2025, 5 years after his death, the main support page his parents built still has over 267,000 followers trading tips with other families living with rare brain conditions. Number 5. Eli Thompson. Brandy McGlathery had already bought baby clothes and dreamed of nursery colors when a 22-week scan in Foley, Alabama, brought everything to a halt. The face on the screen had no nose, no nostrils, no nasal bridge, nothing. Doctors diagnosed it as congenital arrhythmia, a condition so rare that only about 1 in 197 million babies are born with it. Fewer than 50 full cases had ever been recorded. The specialists gave her a choice: terminate the pregnancy or prepare for a life full of unknowns. Brandy and her partner, Troy Thompson, didn't hesitate. They chose life. On a warm night in March 2015, Eli Joseph Thompson was born weighing just over 5 pounds. 5 minutes later, doctors placed an emergency tracheostomy tube in his throat to help him breathe. He had no nasal passages, no sinuses, and no sense of smell. Everything, from feeding to surviving everyday infections, was going to be a struggle. Babies with arrhythmia rarely make it past the first few weeks. But Eli held on. He spent 25 days in the neonatal intensive care unit. Back home, Brandy and Troy began sharing his story online. Within just 4 months, over 150,000 people were following his journey. Donations poured in, raising more than $130,000 to cover round-the-clock nurses, seizure meds, and surgeries. The plan was to use bone from Eli's ribs to build a nasal bridge later on. Surgeons in Dallas and Boston even used 3D printers to design possible future noses for him, structures they hoped could be attached when he got a little older. While his family cared for him, scientists around the world were trying to understand what caused arrhythmia in the first place. In 2023, researchers linked it to mutations in the SMCHD1 gene, which helps guide how faces form in the womb. Eli's blood became part of an international study, and today his DNA helps doctors counsel other families facing the same diagnosis. Experts believe there are still fewer than 100 documented cases worldwide, and about half of those babies die before their first birthday. Eli made it past 2. On June 3, 2017, Eli passed away peacefully in his father's arms during an afternoon nap. Doctors believe a seizure was the cause. He had lived 2 years and 3 months, long enough to laugh, play peekaboo, and eat his favorite applesauce. News outlets called him the miracle without a nose. But to his family, he was much more than a headline. Number 4. Lai Singh. In mid-March of 2008, in the small village of Saini Sunpura, about 31 miles east of New Delhi, a baby girl named Lai Singh was born looking unlike any child the villagers had ever seen. At first glance, she had one head and one body, but her facial features were duplicated. Aside from a single set of ears, she had 2 noses, 2 mouths, and 2 pairs of eyes. To her parents, Sushma and Vinod Singh, she was a blessing. Neighbors and strangers alike crowded at their doorway, touching her feet in respect and leaving small offerings. Some even spoke of building a temple in her honor, believing she was an embodiment of the goddess Durga. The condition is called diprosopis, or craniofacial duplication, and it is among the rarest forms of conjoined twin disorders. Studies that combine registry data from multiple countries estimate it occurs in about 2 cases for every 1 million births, and only a few dozen fully documented patients exist in medical history. Most infants are stillborn, and even those who survive delivery often live only minutes or hours. Lali was one of the exceptionally rare cases that lived beyond the first day. In her first weeks, a local doctor noted she could feed normally and blink all 4 eyes at once. Each day, crowds returned to catch a glimpse of her, some out of devotion, others out of curiosity. Her family declined specialized treatment at first, saying she was like any other child. That choice was shaped by their faith, limited financial resources, and the fact that she seemed to be eating and sleeping without obvious distress. But diprosopis carries serious hidden risks. Along with the facial duplication, babies often have brain malformations, fused airways, or complex vascular structures that can't be seen from the outside. In larger hospitals, early scans are used to map these internal structures and check if the airway and esophagus are functional. Even with that knowledge, there is no surgical cure. Most operations focus only on easing symptoms. About 2 months after her birth, Lali died from sudden cardiac arrest. Her survival for that long was extraordinary in medical terms, and her case is still cited in clinical research as one of the longest-lived infants with complete craniofacial duplication. Number 3. Katie Renfro. Before she ever took her first breath, doctors already knew something about Katie Renfro was different.
I think the best thing about Katie is her personality. She's very outgoing and wild.
Early scans in Pensacola, Florida, showed her head measuring far beyond the normal range, and her parents, Angie and Daniel Renfro, were warned she might never be able to interact. They chose her name, held on to hope, and waited for the day she would arrive. On January 28, 2008, in rural Paxton, Florida, Katie was born. Soon after, she was diagnosed with megalencephaly, an abnormally large brain that can cause severe seizures and developmental delays. Within months, she was having as many as 50 seizures a day. Surgeons removed part of her brain to help control the storms and placed a feeding tube so she could get enough nutrition. But her doctors noticed something else. The brain overgrowth explained part of her condition, but not the dramatic soft tissue swelling in her face. A pediatric specialist at Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital in Hollywood, Florida, suspected a broader overgrowth syndrome, calling her case 1 in a million.
I have never seen anything like it. She is truly unique, perhaps 1 in a million.
Over the years, Katie has endured multiple major operations: brain surgery at 9 months old, several cheek reduction procedures, tonsil removal, and the removal of 2 scalp cysts. In one surgery, doctors removed about 1 pound of excess tissue from her left cheek so she could hold her head up more easily. At home, Katie is the 6th of 8 siblings. She laughs at Disney Channel shows, loves sweet and salty snacks, and still gets most of her calories through her feeding tube. Her mother shares daily updates on a Facebook page called Caring for Katie, where she posts milestones, challenges, and photos. In 2022, Angie launched a GoFundMe to raise money for a wheelchair-accessible van, proof that Katie's care needs remain constant more than a decade after the first headlines. Number 2. Junior Cox Noon. Most babies arrive with peach fuzz hair you can count on one hand, but when Junior Cox Noon entered the world at Brighton General Hospital in late July of 2016, nurses couldn't believe what they were seeing. Weighing just over 10 pounds, he looked like a tiny teddy bear with a full, thick head of hair standing straight up like a built-in blowout. The nurses instantly nicknamed him Baby Bear, and his 32-year-old mom, Chelsea Noon, who happened to be a hairdresser, needed to use a salon dryer just to get him dry. His hair was so dense, letting it air dry would have taken over an hour. Doctors warned that all that newborn hair would probably fall out within weeks. But 9 weeks later, not only was it still there, it was even thicker. His 2-inch strands stood up like cotton candy, and anytime Chelsea took him to the grocery store, strangers couldn't stop touching it. A quick 40-minute shopping trip turned into a 2-hour event filled with questions like, "Do you use mousse on him?" Behind the viral photos was a real medical curiosity. Usually, newborns go through something called telogen effluvium, a phase where baby hair falls out before the real stuff starts to grow. But Junior completely skipped that step. It may be connected to Chelsea's pregnancy, which was full of intense heartburn. A study led by Johns Hopkins found that about 82% of women with strong heartburn gave birth to babies with above-average hair. The theory is that the same hormones that cause heartburn might also speed up hair growth in the womb. Statistically, Junior's hair was rarer than blue eyes. Fewer than 2% of newborns keep more than 1 inch of hair past 3 months, and over 90% of adults experience noticeable hair thinning by the time they're 50. But Junior's hair kept growing. In fact, the last time it was checked, the number of hair follicles on his scalp was still way above the average adult male's, over 27,000 follicles per square inch. Keeping that kind of hair in shape takes real effort. Chelsea only blow dries with cool air to protect his scalp, trims just the ends to avoid split hairs, and smooths it out with baby-safe argan oil when the wind kicks up near Brighton Pier. She's never cut it short, saying she'll let Junior decide when he's ready. Experts actually back that choice, explaining that cutting baby hair too early can damage the soft, naturally tapered strands and make the regrowth look rough. Today, Junior is 9 years old and has just started grade school. Number 1. Nell John Praau. In late January of 2018, a baby born in Manila caught the attention of both local doctors and the global press. His condition was unmistakable: encephalocele, a rare neural tube defect where part of the brain and its protective membranes push through an opening in the skull. In Nell's case, the bulge sat right at the crown of his head, starting out about the size of an egg and growing steadily. His parents, 20-year-olds Angel Puerto and Renell Praau, kept it wrapped in fresh bandages every day to protect the delicate tissue from infection or bleeding while they searched for surgeons willing to operate. Doctors explained that encephaloceles happen when the neural tube fails to close in the earliest weeks of pregnancy. In the United States, it's seen in roughly 1 out of every 10,400 births. Many affected babies need surgery within the first months of life to place the tissue back inside the skull, seal the bone, and lower the risk of rupture or severe infection. In Nell's case, routine prenatal ultrasounds never picked it up. That can happen if the bulge is small early on or hidden by the baby's position in the womb. By the time he was 7 weeks old, the swelling was larger, and his story had reached international audiences. In interviews, Angel called him their special little unicorn baby, a way of staying positive while working tirelessly to raise the money for corrective surgery. The medical outlook for encephalocele depends on exactly where it forms: back of the head, front, sides, or top, and on how much brain tissue is inside the sac. Complications like hydrocephalus, a buildup of fluid inside the brain, can make the situation more dangerous. Globally, experts estimate the condition affects around 1 to 5 in every 10,000 births, with some areas seeing more cases than others. Standard treatment is surgical repair, sometimes alongside placing a shunt to drain fluid. Without closure, the exposed tissue is always at high risk. For Nell's parents, the plan was clear but costly. Keep the swelling clean and stable, protect the skin, and wait until he was strong enough for a craniofacial neurosurgical team to step in. By March of 2018, news outlets reported the family was still gathering funds and waiting for a surgery date. Even without later updates, his case opened the public's eyes to a condition most had never heard of. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.